Okay, it is finally time for us to begin the coding phase of Canon 2. In this video, what we're going to do is create the GameItem class. Let's go ahead and start with a quick review as to what that class is going to look like on a whiteboard. So it is going to be called GameItem. And GameItem is going to contain several things. What is it going to contain? Well, first, some data members. The data members are going to be position, velocity, and texture. They will be private. It's also going to contain some properties. These properties are going to be position, velocity, texture, and origin. These, of course, will all be public. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this on down. Bear with me, it's not the greatest drawing, but it'll have to do. Okay, then of course some behavior that will exist inside of GameItem. It is going to have the ability to update, and of course the ability to draw. And there you go. So again, these are going to be, let's find out where are we at. There we go. So these guys over here are going to be private to the class GameItem. The properties are going to be public, and our methods are going to be public. Now, what does position hold? Position is going to be of type point. It is going to hold an X and a Y value that we are going to use for positioning our object on the screen. Velocity is going to hold a point. Again, it is an X and Y value that is going to represent how many pixels in X and how many pixels in Y need to be added to position each time we update the object. And then finally, we're going to have a texture, which is going to be of type picture box. And this is what is going to hold our reference to the actual picture box control that we drop on the form. Okay? And then our properties are just going to be used for setting and getting information from the respective data member, like such. In fact, I can draw this two-way since we can get and set. And origin will simply give us some information out. What information is it going to give us? It's going to basically give us the width and the height of our picture box divided by 2. So it's going to give us the center of texture. And what is texture? It is our picture box. Okay? And as Logan said a couple videos back, what is it going to be? It's going to be based off 0, 0. So it's not going to take any screen coordinates into account at all. If we have a 20 by 20, just as a quick example, picture box. So what's going to happen? We're going to end up with width divided by 2. So that's going to give us 10. So we're sending a point back. So this is of type point. So it would be sending back 10, 10. Because again, it's going to be our width divided by 2 and our height divided by 2. Okay? So finding the center has nothing to do whatsoever with our screen positioning. Okay? Then we have update. And what's update going to do? Update every time around is simply going to take our position and add our velocity to it. So take our position and add our velocity to it, okay? And then do what with it? We store it back into position. So basically, update is doing what? It's updating our position every time we call upon it based on what the velocity is. So if we want our item to stop, well, we could set our velocity to 0 and 0. What happens? Each time we call update, every game tick, what's going to take place? Well, we take our position, let's say he's at 15 by 15, and we add the velocity to it. 0, 0. And then we put that information back in the position. Did it move? No, it sat there at 15, 15. So keep that in mind. And then finally, our draw. You can see with the update, all we're doing is updating information. We're updating information. We're not actually changing the location of the picture box. So inside of draw, what we need to do is set the location of our texture. Ooh, I love how I try to make that sound confusing for you, and I do it on purpose. What is our texture? Our texture is our referenced picture box. So if we set the texture location, what are we doing? We're setting our picture box's location. So that is what we're doing for draw, because that's what you physically see on the screen. You see it being drawn at a new location. Even though since it's just a Windows app, all we're doing is moving it. You get the idea. We're simulating drawing it. All right, so this is what we're going to create. Good enough, Logan?
Yeah, looks good.
Let's do it.
All right, let's jump into Visual Studio now, and let's begin the project for Canon 2. So we'll go to New Project, and we want a Windows application. And for the name, this is Canon 2.
Okay.
All right. Here's our new project.
All right, so all we want to do right now is simply create a GameItem class. We're not worried about dropping anything on the form or special names or anything at the moment. Just creating a class.
All right, I want to create a folder to hold classes for the project. So I'm going to right-click on the project and add a new folder and call this folder Classes. Then we'll right-click on the folder, add a new item to it, and this will be a new class. This class is going to be our GameItem. Alright, inside of GameItem, the first thing I'm going to do is strip off the classes sub to the namespace. So we're just under Canon 2. And now we can begin working on the GameItem itself. First we'll get our private data members defined. So we need to have our private point for position. Now notice this. You see, point isn't highlighting and not showing that it's not turning green to indicate that it's a known type.
Are we perhaps missing a namespace?
Indeed we are. If we look over at the form now, just to show where I'm getting this from, because I need to add a reference to using. Of course, I could jump into system directly here, but to make this more convenient through code, I want to add a using to the top of our class so that point becomes a usable type.
Okay.
But where would I go to get this if I didn't already know it? Well, we could look at the form. I could jump into its code by pressing F7, and you can see that the form is using more. Actually, here's our class. Our form is using more things than our GameItem is, more namespaces. The one we're actually interested in for the point is drawing. So you see, I could copy that or just retype it here as using system.drawing. And as soon as I do that, point now shows up as a usable type.
It's like magic. Very cool.
Alright, good. We've got point, and that means we can move on to velocity. This will be private of type point called velocity. Alright. And finally, we need to have a reference to a picture box. This will be a private picture box.
Another situation.
called texture.
Notice how picture box is not lit up?
So we need to get picture box. If we look over in form, picture box is a control, and controls are within the namespace windows.forms, so this is the using that we need. And as a matter of fact, just because I'm feeling a little bit lazy, I'll copy this entire line for using system.windows.forms and paste it into the beginning of our GameItem class, and now you can see picture box shows up as a usable type.
Perfect.
Alright, now we should be able to move on to some properties. For the properties, I'm going to just follow the practice we have thus far and define a region. And we'll call this region properties. and in the region. Alright, first property. Let's give access to position. So let's make a public property that is of type point called position. Now, for the get accessor, let's define a block for get. So get will open a curly brace, and we will simply return the position as the get, and then close off the curly brace. Now, to code in the set, we'll have set take in whatever value is passed in. So we'll say that our value, let's throw that in the position itself. So position, I just said that backwards. So our position is equal to value.
Right.
Okay. And that should take care of point. Now, to speed things up...
Or take care of position.
Oh, my bad. I was looking at the wrong word. Alright, to speed this up now, we've got velocity is also a point. So I'm going to copy this entire property for position, jump down below it, and paste it in. So this public point will be for velocity. And we need to return velocity if we're getting, and then set our velocity variable if we're setting. So I'm going to simply copy the velocity variable and paste it in twice. Okay.
There you go. Again, be very careful with your casing here. The actual property names are starting off with capital letters, while the data members are starting off with lowercase letters.
Okay, it takes care of position and velocity. Now let's make a property to allow access to the texture picture box.
Okay.
This will be a public, this time type picture box, and it's simply called texture. And for the get, again, same type thing, we'll return our texture variable. And for set, we'll set our texture variable to whatever value is passed in. And that looks good, so we have all of our simple properties. Now we need to code in the origin property. As a matter of fact, before I get too much further, let me build just to make sure that everything's working thus far so we catch any problems quickly.
Okay, it's all good.
But there's no problem so far. Alright, the origin property will of course be public. It is a point, and it is called origin. Now this property is going to be read-only for various reasons, one of which of course is that we don't have any data member to store an origin in.
Right.
So we're only going to write out a get block. Not only that, what's going to happen inside of this get block is instead of returning a simple value, we're going to perform some calculations and return those as a point.
Okay.
So since we're going to run a full calculation, the line will get a little bit long. I'm actually going to jump down and block in get on two different lines, or on multi-lines. I'll just drop the braces below the get keyword. Now, what do we need to do? Well, since we're returning a point, we don't have any point that we're looking at here. We need to make a new one to return. So we'll say new point, and then we'll specify what information we want to have for point. See, if I hit down a few times, we have an int x and an int y we can specify. For the x, we want to specify whatever our origin should be, well, basically half of the width.
Right.
So,
well, think going left and right means we're dealing with the width.
Right, going up and down means we're dealing with the height.
Exactly. So x and y.
All right, so what x do we want to return? Well, half of the width. So we can look at our texture picture box. It, of course, has a width property.
So when we deal with this texture, here's the neat thing. It's like we're dealing directly with the picture box because it is a reference to the picture box.
Right, because we've defined it as type picture box here. So anything we access, or we have access to anything that any picture box would have.
That's right.
All right, now of course we want to return half of this, so we'll divide by 2, and then that takes care of our x value for the point. Now we can move on to the y value, which is texture.height divided by 2.
Beautiful. That's it.
All right, and then
we need to make sure we return it.
Oh yeah, good point.
So
if I do my build, I was just about to build, which would have, of course, copied.
So we could just simply say return a new point, just like that.
All right, now we're good.
Fantastic.
All right, that's all the properties we need to deal with. So let's look at the methods. Let's jump down outside of the properties region. As a matter of fact, at this point, we could even collapse up the properties region to give us more space to work with. Alright, first, let's look at the update method. This method is, of course, going to be public. It's not going to return anything, so it's void. And it is called update. So we'll block this in. And I guess I might as well go ahead and block in both methods, and then we'll code in each of them.
Quick skeletoning going on.
So, our next method is draw, so it will be public void draw. Block it in, and there's both of our methods. Now, let's code in update. Update, like you've said, needs to take in or look at our position and our velocity, and update our position so that it is updated by whatever values are in velocity. So we take whatever's in velocity and add it to position. Only it's not quite that simple. We can't just add the points together because of the way they work. We actually need to make a new point to store in position. We make that new point by looking at values from position and velocity. So let's code that in. We need to say that our position, and the way I've got it written here is actually, you'll notice when we referred to position here, we referred to it just by itself. For the method, I had written down to refer to it as this.position.
Okay, however you want to do it.
But this, meaning this current instance of the class, dot position is equal to a new point. Now, to make the values for this new point, I'm actually going to finish off the parentheses so that I don't have to worry about missing them at the end, because there's some calculations we need to do for this. We need to say that, alright, we need to make...
First of all, what's the goal? The update is supposed to take the position, and as I showed over on the whiteboard, it's supposed to take the position and add our velocity to it, and then store that back in the position.
Right, except that we can't add points, so what we're really going to do is take our x and our y separately inside of position and add those to the separate x and y at velocity.
Exactly.
And the first parameter to point is going to be x, so let's focus on x. We'll say that x is going to be equal to this dot position dot x plus this dot velocity dot x. And since the line is going to get long, I'm going to put in the comma and jump down to a new line and just tab over underneath our x value. So now we're ready to set y, which is going to be the same thing except with y. So this dot position dot y plus this dot velocity dot y. Alright, and that looks good. So a quick build to test, and everything seems to be working just fine.
Okay, and then finally inside our public draw method, we need to set our texture's location, or we need to set the picture box's location.
Okay, so we'll access our texture for this class, this dot texture. And of course, texture being a picture box has a location property, though we've more commonly seen this as left and top.
Right.
But we do have location also available as a point. And there's a specific reason we're doing this too, because we found through testing that if we set the top and left separately, you sometimes actually saw jitter back and forth when
you see like you'll see the top be set, then you'll see the left occasionally.
Right, so you'll actually see it move twice per update. If we set the location at once as a point, then both top and left have to be accounted for at the same time.
Exactly.
So we can say this texture.location equals a new point. And we needed to set the texture's location to wherever the position of this game item is, though we need to take into account our origin, because we want to look at position as the center of the item. And if we just set it directly, then position is going to mean the top left of the picture box. So we're going to need to take our current position and then subtract the origin from it. Because remember, if we started at 0, 0, or if we had the control at 0, 0, we'd have to move it up and then left in order to center it.
Right.
So let's take our position, so this dot position dot x minus this dot origin dot y. Dot x. I wanted to jump ahead.
Again, the idea here is our actual setting of the location is to center it up.
Right, and that's why we have to account for origin. Alright, that takes care of x. Let me jump down to a new line and tab over, and we'll handle y. So we'll say that y is equal to this dot position dot y minus this dot origin dot y. Alright?
And if we did not do the this.origin.x and .y and just left position.x and .y, it would have been like setting a top and left.
Right, all of our positioning would be from the top left instead of from the center.
So by subtracting away x and subtracting away y, if you draw it on a piece of paper, you'll find yourself having centered that picture box then.
Okay. Well, let's do a quick build, and everything seems to be working.
Fantastic.
So that should be everything we need
for
the GameItem class.
Yep, that gives us 3 private data members, 4 public properties, and 2 public methods. And with that, that is going to wrap up this video on creating the GameItem class. Thanks.